Hello all and welcome to another episode of No White Borders. Really excited about the deck that I'm playing in particular today because I've wanted to make Spirit Tribal for a very long time, so without further ado, let's get to the opening hands. I'm starting us off. I'm bringing you a Millicent Spirit Tribal deck, beginning with four lands, including a Field of Ruin and a Moorland Hunt, Sol Ring, Spectral Adversary, and a Promise of Bun Ray. Not too many spirits in the tribal deck, but I'm hoping that I can ramp pretty quickly regardless. Then Coxie is bringing us Runo, and he starts with three lands, an Ivory Tower, Kami, Evil Twin, and Havengul Lich. Then Raz goes third, and he's bringing us Jor Kadeen, and keeps his opening hand a Plains, Temple of the False God, Lorehold Campus, a Sol Ring, Mystic Skull, Sculpting Steel, and Horde Smelter Dragon. Then last in the turn order will be Andy bringing us his Edgar Markov deck. He starts off with 6 lands and an Ob Nicholas. Have to appreciate the bravery of keeping a hand like this. So with that, I will stop yapping about opening hands, and we'll get straight into the gameplay. I start the game off and crack a Flooded Strand, losing 1 life and getting out a Glacial Floodplain. It's an island into Ivory Tower for Coxie. It's a Lorehold Campus for Raz. And a Bloodfell Caves for Andy, gaining 1 life. Then it's round to my turn again. I play out a basic Plains into a Sol Ring, and then tap out into a Commander's Sphere. Coxie gains 2 at the beginning of his turn thanks to the Ivory Tower. He then follows that up with Kami of the Crescent Moon, meaning that each of us is going to draw 2 cards at the beginning of our turn. Raz completely copies me here because he thinks I'm really cool, into a Sol Ring, and once again into a Commander's Sphere. Andy throws out a basic, and then thanks to Kami has to discard to hand size and Orzhov Guild Gate. My land for the turn is Skycloud Expanse, and then I throw out Promise of Bun Ray. Coxie gains 1 life from the Ivory Tower this time, and then plays his commander Runo. Raz plays another basic, and then casts Horde Smelter Dragon. Then it's an unclaimed territory on Andy's turn, and he casts Markov Purifier. At the end of Andy's turn, I play my first spirit in Spectral Adversary. Then on my turn, it is play and equip the Sword of the Animist for a total of 4 mana, and then that's 3 damage onto Andy. During attacks, I get to search for a basic and put it into play tapped thanks to the sword I just played. Coxie gains 2 life from the Ivory Tower this time, and then follows that up casting a Tidehollow Strix. Slayer's Stronghold for Raz on his turn. He then casts Cursed Mirror, which comes down as a copy of the Horde Smelter Dragon. Then trying to take advantage of the highest converted mana cost, Raz activates the copy of the Horde Smelter Dragon he's just made for 4 mana, and targets my Commander's Sphere with that. Unfortunately, he didn't take into account that I can sacrifice it in response and effectively counter the ability here. So I sacrifice the Commander's Sphere and draw a card. He then turns the dragons in sideways regardless. I get 5 damage dealt to me, and Andy gets 5 damage dealt to him in the air also. Another basic for Andy, and this time it's into Cliffhaven Vampire. He then takes the Markov Purifier into the red zone against Raz, dealing 2 damage to him and gaining 2 life himself. That triggers the Cliffhaven Vampire and we all lose 1 life from that. I play an island and then cast Reconnaissance Mission, and then swing in at Raz for 3 damage with my spirit, triggering the Sword of the Animist yet again and getting a Rampant Growth. Once I've hit, I do also draw a card from the Reconnaissance Mission I just played. It's 2 for Coxie yet again from the Ivory Tower. And then looking to gain even more life and draw even more cards, he casts Alhamret's Archive. Then on to Raz's turn, it's the ever cool to hate Temple of the False God. He then taps that into Steel Overseer. He then casts Sculpting Steel and makes a copy of his Steel Overseer. Raz then makes even more mana with a Hedron's Archive. Andy plays Forsaken Sanctuary in tapped, and then casts a Blood Artist, which comes in with his 3rd Vampire token thanks to Edgar Markov. I play a Plains for the turn, and then turn my single spirit in sideways towards Raz again for 3 damage, getting the Rampant Growth and drawing a card from the Reconnaissance Mission once again. I then go on to play the Nebelgeist during the main phase, not realising that it has flash. This is my first run with this deck, so that's my excuse. When it enters, I tap down Coxie's Death Toucher, and then cast Arcane Signet for a little bit more mana, and then make use of that mana to cast a Skyclave Apparition. The trigger goes on the stack, pointed at the Blood Artist, and I do successfully manage to exile that. It's once again 2 life from the Ivory Tower for Coxie, but that gets doubled up to 4 life thanks to the Alhamrit's Archive. Then he draws 1 card during his draw step to the Alhamrit's Archive, and then any further draws are doubled up, so Kami allows him to draw a further 2. He casts Sphinx's Tutelage to start getting some mill onto his opponents. He swings in with Runo and the Strix at Raz for a total of 3 damage. He goes on autopilot a little bit here and none of us catch it for some reason. He makes a copy of the Strix and swings that in at Raz as well. So Raz does take the damage, but we correct it later on when Coxie realises his error here. Fortress of the Legion for Raz. And the big scary plays continue from Raz. It is a Steel Hellkite. He then activates the Horde Smelter Dragon, blowing up the Alhamrit's Archive, giving the Horde Smelter Dragon +5 to its power until the end of the turn. So the Horde Smelter Dragon is now a 10-5 in the air, and that swings in at Coxie. And he plays a Stone Quarry in tapped, and follows that up with a Blood Bond Vampire. He then goes on to swing the Markov Purifier in at me to gain some life. I take the 2 damage, and he gains his 2 life and triggers the Cliffhaven Vampire, dealing an extra 1 damage to all of us, and putting a plus counter on his Blood Bomb Vampire. I draw 2 thanks to Kami, and then cast a Bygone Bishop. I then play an island for the turn, and finally cast my commander Millicent. Both of those spirits entering trigger the Nebelgeist, so I tap down Andy's Cliffhaven Vampire, and Raz's Steel Hellkite. I then go through to combat and swing in the 3-power Spectral Adversary at Coxie, triggering the Rampant Growth on the sword again, and swing 2 power from the Nebelgeist in towards Raz. Both of those hit, so I draw 2 cards from the Reconnaissance mission. I also get 2 Spirit tokens thanks to my commander. The tokens entering trigger the Nebelgeist Herald as well, so I tap down one of Andy's tokens as well as his Blood Bomb Vampire. It's 3 life from the Ivory Tower this time for Coxie. He then draws his 2 cards for the turn, pointing the Sphinx at Andy, so Andy mills 2. The cards don't share any colours, so he goes on to mill a further 2 from the second trigger, and once again no colours shared, so just 4 cards milled for Andy. Then it's a Nemesis of Reason for Coxie, and he leaves his turn there, so Raz taps down both of his Steel Overseers to put plus counters, 2 plus counters, on all of his artifact creatures. Then through to Raz's turn, he decides to try and give me a hard time by casting Concussive Ball on me, dealing 4 damage to me, and seeing as how he has Metalcraft, he's going to make it so that my creatures can't block this turn. The Horde Smelter Dragon then blows up the Death Touching Strix, and gets +2 to its power, going up to a 7-5. He then goes through to combat and turns his Steel Hellkite in towards me, that is currently a 7-7, and then the 7-powered Horde Smelter Dragon swings in Coxie's direction. We both take the damage, going down by 7 apiece, and then with combat over, Raz decides to activate the Steel Hellkite and puts 3 mana into that, attempting to blow up all of my 3 mana permanents. So in an attempt to save my board, I play Guardian of Faith, phasing out Nebelgeist Herald, Bygone Bishop, and Skyclave Apparition. The Guardian of Faith then dies thanks to the Steel Hellkite's trigger resolving. It also destroys the Promise of Bunray, but seeing as how the Promise of Bunray needs to see something die and then be sacrificed, it obviously can't be sacrificed if it's just been blown up by the Steel Hellkite, so no spirits from that unfortunately. The Guardian of Faith entering triggers the Nebelgeist as well, so I point that at the Nemesis on Coxie's side of the field, tapping that down. It also triggers the Bygone Bishop, so I get a Clue token. There's even more triggers yet though. Once the Guardian of Faith dies, it triggers the Millicent and I get another Spirit token into play from that. The Spirit coming in from the Millicent should have triggered the Nebelgeist as well, but I just forgot about it here. And with all that shenanigans done, it's round to Andy's turn, and he feels the need to try and wipe the board here, so casts himself a Blasphemous Act. Luckily some of my creatures are phased out. He still manages to get rid of my Spectral Adversary and the Millicent, as well as the 3 tokens that I have in play. The non-token creatures dying will trigger the Millicent and instantly be replaced by 2 more Spirit tokens after everything's died. I obviously keep my phased out creatures here as well. After the wipe he goes for Vampire Nocturnus, revealing a Dragon Skull Summit on the top of his library. At the end of Andy's turn I crack my Raging Clue token and then begin my turn. My creatures phase back in and I only draw 1 now, as do we all thanks to Kami going down to the Blasphemous Act. I then go on to play Cathar's Crusade during my main phase. Millicent only costs 4 here thanks to me managing to keep spirits in play, so I recast my commander as well. That does of course trigger the Cathar's Crusade I just played, so a plus counter goes on all of my creatures. It also triggers the Nebelgast, so pretty slim pickings. I go after the Vampire Nocturnus being tapped down. I then swing in a 3-power Bygone Bishop and a 3-power Nebelgast Herald at Andy, then a 3-power Skyclave Apparition at Coxey, as well as a 2-power token, and then the remaining 2-power token in towards Raz. All the damage is taken here, so Raz takes 2, Andy takes 6, and Coxey takes 5. So damage triggers go on the stack now. There are 5 triggers from the Reconnaissance mission, which will draw me 5 cards. And then 3 non-token spirits dealt damage, so that is 3 spirit tokens from the Millicent. Those tokens entering triggers the Nebelgast, so I just point them all at Andy's token. But the main worry here is that it triggers the Cathar's Crusade 3 times, so all of my creatures get 3 +1/+1 counters. I decide to pass at that. I have 12 cards in hand, so have to discard 5 of them. This includes 4 lands and a Hanged Executioner. Coxey draws a card and points his mill enchantment towards me. I flip over a Negate and a Selfless Spirit. Then during his first main is Havengul Lich, and he follows that up casting a Nightveil Spectre. On Raz's turn he casts a Hellkite Igniter. He then plays Mystic Skull. Then going through to combat, he activates his Hellkite Igniter twice and swings in for 15 towards Coxey. He didn't realise that the Nightveil Spectre was a flyer, unfortunately, so Coxey just nonchalantly chump blocks that. Andy continues to attempt to deal with the entire board's predicament here, and casts a Diabolic Tutor. He finds his card and reveals another land on the top to the Vampire Nocturnus, and then casts a Day's Judgment. I have a response to this, however, and decide to cast Rattle Chains in response. When it enters the battlefield, it will give my Millicent hexproof in this instance. It also triggers the Cathar's Crusade, putting a plus counter on all of my creatures. But the main thing here is that it allows me to cast spirits with flash. So thanks to the flash, I can cast Mausoleum Wanderer, putting more plus counters on everything thanks to Cathar's Crusade. And I can sacrifice the Mausoleum Wanderer to counter the board wipe here, because Andy has fully tapped out to it. I'm getting a bunch of Nebelgast triggers here as well, so just decide to tap down all the creatures eventually. Then when the Mausoleum Wanderer is sacrificed, yet again that is another trigger, this time from the Millicent, giving me another spirit token, and triggering the Cathar's Crusade once again. I also should have got some clue tokens from the Bygone Bishop here, but completely forgot about that. So it's round to my turn with a massive evasive army and all of my opponent's creatures tapped out now, but not feeling as though my spirits are quite big enough yet apparently. I play a Drogskull Reinforcements on my turn. So if I spread the damage and attack all 3 of my opponents here, then all of my spirits that are attacking are going to get +3/+3. This entering does of course trigger the Cathar's Crusade yet again, putting more plus counters on everything. I then go through to the red zone and turn everything in sideways at all 3 of my opponents, and managed to take them all out in one fell swoop. So hopefully you all enjoyed that one. I have wanted to make a Spirit Tribal deck for years, and as soon as I saw Millicent I was very excited. So really glad to get round to playing that eventually. If you enjoyed it as well, then be sure to leave it a thumbs up and subscribe. Let me know what you thought of this game in the comments section as well. Big thank you to my 3 friends for playing here as well, and thank you to Raz for actually sleeving up his deck. I'm tribalkai, on No White Borders. Thank you for watching.